Hi everyone, we are back with the 23rd session of Mellow Musings, and I am Manju Jetkar again. We look forward to a session that's going to be as interesting as the speaker today. And you bet we have a wonderful speaker, somebody who can keep you interested and, well, you won't feel like leaving the session, I can assure you. So today's session is the 23rd, and we are reaching the end of the year. We started in January. That means every fortnight we have been meeting. Mellow Musings has been coming together, and Mellow Musings, as you're aware, is one of the, should I say, subsidiaries of Mellow, the Society for the Study of the Multi-Ethnic Literatures of the World, which recently had its 26th or 27th conference. Which one was it, Roshan? Yeah. So
It was 26th.
yeah. So we have been very busy, and we are going to be even busier in times to come. Today's session is going to be moderated by Roshan, who is there on the screen. Hi, Roshan. How are you?
I'm perfectly fine, man. Absolutely.
Great. So just to give you a brief introduction of Roshan, actually you don't really, you don't need an introduction. Everyone knows you, but Roshan is one of our oldest members. I don't mean in age, he's still very young. So he is one of our, well, he's one of our earliest members, and he is one of the pillars of Mellow. So he's always around, always there, and he has no option because otherwise he would have to deal with someone like me. Thank you, Roshan, for being around. He is located in Central University of Himachal in Dharamshala. He is an excellent host, and he has hosted two conferences of Mellow out there. Incidentally, he has a lot of clout in the university, and he can, well, whenever we want, we he opens up the doors for us. Thanks again for that, Roshan. So he's going to be the moderator today. And we have a speaker, as I said, he'll keep you interested throughout this 1 hour that we are on screen, and that is Niladri. So you can see Niladri out here. The screen does not do him justice. When you look at him, you find that his eyes beam, they twinkle with intellect, with wit, and he has the knack of holding you with his eyes and, of course, his words. He is one of the, well, most upcoming learned scholars that we have. And we are so happy to have you here, Niladri. But Roshan is going to give a proper introduction to Niladri. So we are going to have, this is how we plan it. We'll have this conversation with the introduction by Roshan, then a talk by Niladri, a little bit of maybe Roshan might feel like interspersing in between. And afterwards, we'll have a short Q&A. And the whole session will be for about 1 hour. I think that's fair enough before we
Yeah,
start. Yeah, because we all have, limited time and so many other commitments. Of course, we would love to go on listening to Niladri, but 1 hour is the time we keep for our mellow musings. So what we do is we generally switch off our videos, and then when we want to speak, we switch them on again later. Right. So we'll have Roshan and Niladri on the screen. Niladri, do you have a PPT by any chance?
no.
Great. No, you don't need a PPT because, well, you are a performance in yourself. Well, yes. And okay to you, Niladri and Roshan. And honestly, we are so glad to have both of you here.
Very happy to be here.
Thank you very much, man. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So I've been assigned, with this task of moderating this session, and Niladri. Actually, Professor Niladri Chatterjee uh, happened to be there as a key speaker for our Dibrugarh conference, and that was where I had the opportunity to meet him. A wonderful person and a great speaker, of course. I have got this brief bio, very brief bio, I would say, because he has been doing a lot of work, in fact. But it's of course a privilege, and I'll just share that with you. Professor Chatterjee basically is from the Department of English, University of Kalyani, West Bengal. and his doctoral work was on the novelist Christopher Isherwood, a recipient of Fulbright Scholarship for which he went to University of Texas at Austin, and the British Council Charles Wallace Fellowship, University of Cambridge. Professor Chatterjee has co-edited The Muffled Heart, Stories of the Disempowered Male, which was published by Rupa in 2005. He has also contributed to The American Isherwood, published by University of Minnesota Press, 2015, and also to Oxford Dictionary of National Biography in 2004. And then the Isherwood Century, which was published by University of Wisconsin Press in 2001, and Reader's Companion to 20th Century Writers, published from London in 1995 and published by Fourth Estate Helicon. He is published in the journal American Notes and Queries, a very, very prestigious one, published by Taylor and Francis, and Intersections, and has reviewed for Gay and Lesbian Review worldwide. He was also a member of the editorial board of the aforementioned American Notes and Queries. In March 2011, he served as visiting faculty at the Department of English, University of North Bengal. He has been teaching a course in gender studies at his university since 2009. That shows the kind of engagement that he has, with gender studies. And he runs a Facebook group called New Gender Studies, which has over 14,000 members. Huge and pretty impressive. Professor Chatterjee has recently begun contributing to The Wire. So we could keep a note of that because every now and then I'm sure he'll keep appearing there. With Tutan Mukherjee, he co-edited Nari Bhav, Androgyny and Female Impersonation in India, which was published by Niyogi Books in 2016. He has translated the fiction of Krishna Gopal Malik entitled Entering the Maze, queer fiction of Krishna Gopal Malik in 2023, which of course is the latest publication from him, and he is the recipient of Rainbow Literature Award 2023. In addition to that, let me tell you, I mean, he's going to deliver his talk on Shibram Chakraborty's Chele Boyoshe. You have to forgive my pronunciation, Professor Niladri, which was published in 1925. And interestingly, and all of us must note that Professor Chatterjee has translated this novel, and this is going to see the light of day. This is going to see the light of day next year, and it is going to be published by The Speaking Tiger. So, with that brief introduction, we have Professor Niladri there, and he is going to tell us and share his critical insights about Chele Boyoshe, a very, very important text. Uh, Professor Niladri, we know how much time we have, maybe 30, 35 minutes. And then, of course, in case there is anything that I feel like possibly discussing about or inquiring about, I won't disturb you much though. But yeah, after you're done, we could just move in and then we could open the house, for discussion. Over to you, Professor Chatterjee.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Sharma, for that very kind introduction. I'm so happy to be a part of MELOW now. And I had a wonderful time in Dibrugarh, and I'm extremely happy to continue that relationship with MELOW. Today, I intend to talk about this writer who is extremely well known all across Bengal. He is known particularly as a children's writer. So therefore, there is hardly, a Bengali-speaking child in Bengal who has not heard of Shibram Chakraborty. He is known primarily as a humorist. He is known for producing short fiction, and he is particularly well known for creating these characters called Harshavardhan Govardhan. They are like a comic duo, a bit like Laurel and Hardy, and they get up to all kinds of funny adventures in the course of their life. So Shibram Chakraborty really is known for that. But what most of us are not aware of is that Shibram Chakraborty wasn't always a humorist. It's just that he became a humorist. He started to churn out these stories for children, really because he wanted to make money. And his first work, which is the work that we are going to talk about today, his first work was this the novella actually, which was published in 1925. He was just a young man in his 20s then. He was probably 21 or 22. So this is a novel that is not of great sort of literary merit. It doesn't have that because it's not a very strong novel when you think about it in literary terms. But I think it's a very important novel in the context of sort of Bengali literature, in the context of Indian literature, in the context of how the freedom struggle is portrayed in literature and in culture. All the time that we think about the Indian freedom struggle, we think about it in almost entirely heteronormative terms. Yes. So therefore, we just automatically assume that all the people who took part in the freedom struggle, they were all 100% heterosexual to a man. And then women hardly ever get a look in. But even when women do get a look in, they are like, they're like side characters and all of that. And everybody is unproblematically heterosexual. And then comes across this novel called Chele Boyoshe, which actually translates in English as In the Boyhood Years. And what Shivram Chakraborty is doing is he's actually setting his novel in a boarding, well, not in a boarding school, but more like at a boys' hostel. At a boys' hostel, and this hostel is where you have, young boarders, you have older boarders. And when I say older boarders, I mean people who are, men who are 17, 18. Something that I should absolutely state at the very beginning is that we have to understand what was the age of consent at that time. That I think is a very important thing for us to remember. The age of consent at that time was 14. 14. So when Shivram Chakraborty is, showing you these boys who are 14, 15 years old, and they're being shown getting into romantic relationships, sexual relationships, remember that in the eyes of the law, they are adults. So that I think is something that we should keep in mind. Let me talk a little bit about the theoretical backdrop of this novel. He didn't do the theorization. I'm doing it because, I'm a professor and that's what we do. Um, think about the way in which we regard friendship. Yes. And think about the relationship that friendship has with love. Now, the relationship between friendship and love is a very interesting one because if we go as far back as possible in time, so even if we go to, for example, our own ancient literature, I'm thinking particularly about the Ramayana, but more particularly about the Mahabharata. And if we actually go back to ancient Greece, we are going to find that love and friendship, they actually coexist. There is no separation between the two. Yes. And I can talk about the way in which love and friendship they operate in ancient Greece. Because you see, if you look at the work of Plato, and if you look at, well, I mean, you can look at any book by Plato, but if you look at Plato's Phaedrus in particular, you are going to find that Plato very often uses the words friend and lover in a coterminous way. So therefore, as far as Plato is concerned, and Plato very often is sort of ventriloquizing for Socrates,
Mhm.
at least in this book. So therefore, being in love and being friends, they are regarded as being indistinguishable. You could be both at one and the same time. Let's come to our own time. So you see, if we look at the Vedas, you are going to find that there is this sort of Sanskrit phrase which goes Saptapadam Himitram. Saptapadam Himitram, which basically means, and padam over here, obviously, it's got two meanings. Pada can mean a footstep or a step, but a pada can also mean a word. So, therefore, seven steps taken or seven words spoken constitute friendship. Yes. So, if we think about friendship, we say that the moment you've taken seven steps with somebody, you've become their friend. The moment you've addressed seven words to somebody, you have become their friend. Now, you see how patriarchy takes that idea, totally, hijacks it and applies it to this extremely toxic institution of marriage, because of course by the time we come to the institution of marriage, it becomes seven steps around the fire, saat phere. So therefore, look at the way in which patriarchy basically hijacks the idea of friendship, imposes into the very toxic structure of marriage, and starts this lie that marriage is basically about friendship. Well, marriage is not basically about friendship at all. Marriage and friendship, they don't go together. Clearly, they don't. Now, if we come to slightly more modern times, and by modern I'm saying 44 BC, if we come to that time, one of the earliest people to talk about friendship was Cicero. Going further down the centuries, we can come to Montaigne. Montaigne writes about friendship in 1580. And then, of course, you've got Francis Bacon, who writes about friendship in 1612. So, therefore, what these people are doing is they are grappling with the idea of friendship, and they're trying their best to somehow, as it were, update the idea of friendship. And when I say update, I mean that they are trying to make friendship, they're trying to bring friendship in closer alignment with Christianity. That is what they're doing. They're trying to bring friendship in closer alignment with Christianity. And as far as Christianity is concerned, of course, marriage by that time has taken over as the most predominant, the most important relationship that somebody can have, which is completely opposed to the Greek idea, according to which friendship was the most important relationship that one could have. Marriage is something that you just did, but friendship really took on a lot of your time and your emotional energy. Now, that is what I would want you to keep in mind when we come to this particular story, Chele Boyoshe. Because what we find in Chele Boyoshe is that this is a very homosocial environment. This is an environment where you've got boys who are aged, like I said, 14, 15, and then there are these senior boys who are aged sort of 17, 18, and they all live together in this boys' hostel, and what they get up to. What is interesting is that two of the boys, somebody called Oshanto. Now, Oshanto, can be translated as, the unstable one or the unruly one. Yes, Shanto as in peaceful, Oshanto as in somebody who's not very peaceful. Yeah, full of life, as it were, but in a positive sense. So there is Oshanto, and then there is Mohan. Mohan, of course, in Hindi and in Bengali, they both mean the same thing. Oshanto and Mohan, one is 14, the other is 15. They fall in love with each other. And this particular couple of the two boys, they constitute the central emotional relationship. They are, as it were, the lead pair in the novel. Yes. Now, that is the emotional part of it. But then there is this political part of it as well, which is that Oshanto and Mohan, they are liked enormously by the slightly older boy, whose name is Deben. And what Deben does is that he links this particular narrative to a much darker subplot in the novel, which the novelist would want us to believe is the main plot. namely that Deben is part of an underground group of armed resistance who are fighting for freedom. Yeah. So therefore, they are part of this underground movement. They have got arms. They are constantly, I mean, you can think of them as a terrorist organization, really. And they are there to basically fight the British. But this is the interesting thing is that, so far, whenever we have looked at the history of the freedom struggle, we have had so many stories and only stories about, men loving women and women loving men. I can't think of a single story in which there are men loving men. And that I think is something which Shibram Chakraborty was doing in 1925. And remember, he is doing this when the British are very much there. So he's taking a big risk when he's writing the novel. We don't actually know anything about the reception of the novel. We don't know how it was received by the general public, but we do know that two of the most important novelists of the time, namely Rabindranath Tagore and Sarat Chandra Chatterjee, the rest of India knows Sarat Chandra Chatterjee as the author of Devdas. So therefore, these two men, they definitely knew about this very young, very callow, up-and-coming writer called Shibram Chakraborty. Shibram claims to have received a letter from Tagore, not about this novel, but generally about his career. He, however, sends a copy of the novel to Sharat Chandra Chatterjee for, a preface for a forward. And Sharat Chandra Chatterjee, of course, doesn't bother to read it. He writes a very perfunctory preface to the effect that, oh, yes, 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 I'm very pleased with the work of this very young up and coming writer. I wish him all the best. I'm sure his novel is going to be successful, etc., etc. Very lazily done. He, sorry, he clearly hasn't read the novel. Mm. Now, the thing is, what exactly is going on in the novel? I told you about, Oshanto, and I told you about Mohan. Oshanto and Mohan, they meet and they fall in love. They meet two times, actually. They meet once at a cinema house, and then they later meet at a different location. So the novel is set partly in Calcutta and partly in Malda. Yes, which is where you get a lot of mangoes from. So therefore, it is set in. So they first meet in Calcutta and they meet again in Malda. Now, here is the thing: is that they are both highly um, sensitive to each other's beauty. And Mohan is regarded as being the more beautiful of the two. And they're very sensitive to each other's beauty. They're obviously physically attracted to each other. There is one very passionate kiss that happens between them. But what complicates matters is the fact that Mohan also becomes, as it were, the object of affection of somebody called Taresh. Now, Taresh is an extraordinary character because he is regarded as what I would translate as a boy hunter. He's a boy hunter. He's always looking for pretty boys. He was initially attracted to Oshanto, but he finds Mohan much, much more attractive. And there are scenes in which I think what effectively happens is that not Oshanto, sorry, Taresh molests Mohan. And so therefore, and this is something which Shibram Chakraborty, as an author, of course, takes grave exception to. And he sort of says, oh, this is terrible. And this is something that absolutely should not happen. This person is evil. He's taking the youth of India down the path of destruction. These people should be rooted out of society. And what is extraordinary is that he is creating some kind of a binary in the novel. And this is a very strange binary. On the one hand, on the one side, he is putting love, and on the other side, he is putting lust. And he clearly wishes to advocate that love is better than lust. Now, when he is doing that, he is, of course, playing directly into the hands of patriarchy because, of course, patriarchy is extremely disturbed at the prospect of pure lust because pure lust is regarded as a very bad thing. So, therefore, if patriarchy has to find lust acceptable, then that lust has to be, as it were, gentrified. It has to be made bhadra, yes? It has
Mm.
to be made palatable with the coating of love. So once lust is coated with love, well, then that becomes acceptable. And lust for its own sake, of course, is regarded as a very bad thing. And which is why, to make a slight digression, when the 2018 verdict came out of Supreme Court decriminalizing homosexuality, the verdict was a very weird one because yes, it does decriminalize homosexuality, but for the first time in a legal judgment the word love appears, and I find personally that extremely disturbing because section 377 was never about love. It had nothing to do with love. It was only about lust. It was only about sexual desire. It was only about sex. So the moment you bring love into a law that was only and only about sexual intercourse, what you're doing is you're sentimentalizing sex. And the moment you're sentimentalizing sex, you are basically making sex, party to patriarchy.
Mm.
So I think that is something that we should probably keep in mind. Um, so what Shibram Chakraborty is doing is he's creating this binary where love is on the one side, lust is on the other, but that is not where it ends. And I think that is where it becomes very, very peculiar. Because what he actually goes on to do is that he adds on to the binary.
Mm.
He actually adds on to the binary. So, on the one hand, he, for example, says that he puts Deshbhakti and Janosheba on the side of love.
Mm.
Deshbhakti and Janseva. Yeah, this, of course, does not require much of a translation.
Mm.
Deshbhakti and Janseva. He is putting them on the side of love. Now, on the other side, and this is something which I find very, very strange, is Dushsahosh and Biplab. Now, that is the weird part. Because on the bad side, he has kept Dushsahosh, which I guess I would translate as daring, and Biplab, which is revolution. Now, that is where it starts to become very peculiar. So, what are you saying, Mr. Chakraborty? Are you saying that Jonosheva, that is to say, welfare, common welfare, that is good? Okay, yes, we all agree. But
Mm.
then you're saying revolution is bad. So, what kind of Jonosheba do you expect the youth to do, which is not going to be revolutionary?
Yeah.
It's a very strange question. So, what he's actually doing is, and this is something that I have found out while talking to Tagore's scholars, is that this is something very, very similar to what Tagore was also doing.
Mm.
Basically, rural regeneration.
Yeah.
So therefore, what Shibram Chakraborty seems to be saying is that the way of armed revolution is bad, the way of public welfare is good. And he gives you two characters. On the one hand, you have got people like Debin, and there is this other man that Debin is in love with, who is in love with another man. So there's like a chain of love that happens amongst these men. And on the other hand, you have somebody else who is not at all interested in armed revolution, but who is very, very popular among the local villagers because that is where he does work of, rural renewal or rural regeneration. Now, this is broadly the story that is mapped out for us. And what we have is a very strange conversation that happens once between Deben and Tarish. Now, you have to understand that Deben is somebody who is in love, and Tarish is somebody who is pretty much in lust. Not Debian, but there's somebody else as well. So he says that, oh, I'm sorry, I've got to get the name of this particular character. He is somebody who is the one who is in charge of urban renewal. And Taresh and this particular other character, they are having a discussion, and that is where Shotish, his name is Shotish. And Shotish is saying that, look, I am willing to admit that it is, pretty boys are hard to resist. I mean, everybody in the novel seems to be completely gay. I am willing to admit, says Shotish, that pretty boys are hard to resist, but I have found a way to deal with it. I don't run after their bodies. I am here to develop their minds. Please try and understand over here how the extraordinary mind body binary seems to function. So, therefore, developing the mind is a good thing, but so reforming the mind is a good thing, being attracted to the mind is a good thing, being attracted to the body is a bad thing. So therefore this mind body binary is something that we are extremely familiar with. All of Western culture is full of it. Body as male, I'm sorry, body as female and the mind as male. And so therefore it seems to be that if you are interested in young boys, and if you're a man yourself, you should be interested in the boys' minds. You should not be interested in the boys' bodies. And that is something which seems to be happening in the conversation between Shotish and Taresh. And Shoti says, no, 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 I'm not at all interested in the bodies of these boys, although some of those boys are actually quite attractive. And Taresh says, oh, what nonsense is it? And then Taresh says something very strange. He says, you are saying that my hunting for boys is a bad thing. Yes, I seduce the boys, and that is a bad thing. But you are saying that you would much rather not conquer the bodies of the boys. You'd much rather conquer their minds. Well, that is just seduction by another name. And when he says that, you suddenly begin to lose your moral ground as a reader, because all this time you have been conditioned to think of Taresh as a bad character. Yes, he is the boy hunter, and Shotish is a good person. He is all for rural regeneration, and he is thinking of setting up libraries and all of that. He wants to reform the whole society. So therefore, we think of Shotish as a good character. We think of Taresh as a bad character. And then suddenly Taresh says something. He says, well, if you are going to, run after the boys' minds, well, that is another form of seduction, but it is still seduction. So how is your seduction, qualitatively different from mine? And when he poses that question, I think the whole moral compass of the novel, as it were, it is disturbed. And I think it is this disturbance which I think is really so wonderful, because suddenly the reader does not know how to react. Who do I sympathize with? Because suddenly you find Naresh, this evil, evil man, he is actually making a lot of sense. Now, what really happens towards the end is that, unfortunately, there is a terrorist attack that is staged by one of the characters. They are imprisoned, and they are about to hang. And so, therefore, these young men who are a part of the terrorist organization, they all come to a very sticky end. The police arrests them, they're about to be hanged and all of that. And then Shotish, this young man who has sublimated his love for the boys, he is sort of, he is hoisted on the shoulders of very grateful villagers, because, he has come to their rescue. So Shotish then, is completely covered in glory. What happens to the lead characters? What happens to Oshanto and Deben? Well, they elope. They run away. They run away because Mohan says that I can't possibly live in this, boys' hostel anymore, because Taresh is making my life hell. I love you, and Oshanto says, well, I love you. So therefore, they both run away. So can you imagine that way back in 1925, we are actually getting a novel which has got a gay happy ending.
Mhm.
And this gay happy ending is not happening because these two young men are in their early 20s or something. These are practically teenagers. One is 14, the other is 15. But again, as I am reminding you, the age of consent at that time was 14. So therefore, in the eyes of the law, these two boys are actually adults. So, what we really are looking at, therefore, is what is the point of this novel? Why write this novel at all? My reading of the novel throws up two possible reasons. One is clearly that Shivram Chakraborty wanted to express, his love of boys. Mind you, Shivram Chakraborty was what is called in polite society a confirmed bachelor. He never married. There are all these stories about Shivram Chakraborty having once loved a woman somewhere, and that woman cannot be found. I mean, it could be one of those urban myths, urban legends. Once upon a time he was in love with this woman. This woman was never traced. Nobody knows. So therefore, the heteronormative biographers of Shivram Chakraborty, they have somehow managed to produce some woman that he was apparently in love with. Nothing much came of that love. But Shibram Chakraborty, all his life, he was very, very solicitous of young men. He used to live in absolute wretched poverty. Again, at a hostel, in a hostel in Kolkata, a boarding house, as it were. His room was an absolute shambles. It was completely squalid, but he was full of generosity. He was a very generous man. So much so that stories of his generosity are rife. And sometimes and very often he didn't have much to offer the visitors who used to come to visit him. So on one occasion, there is the story of a young man coming to visit him and Shibram Chakraborty offering him, a tablet. And then this young man says, "Oh my God, why are you giving me a tablet? I'm fine. I don't have any illness." And he says, "No, no, no, this is a digestive tablet. You're going to need it after I've fed you something." So therefore, that's the thing. He sometimes if he didn't have anything, he would just give you a tablet, but that is what he would give you. So therefore, why is he writing the novel? Well, the first part of it is that he wanted to express, the fact that boys can fall in love with boys, but then he wanted to couch it, as it were, in a frame narrative. It's not quite a frame narrative, but he wanted this to be the ostensible reason for writing the novel. He writes a big introduction. And in the introduction, he basically says that I am writing this novel to make it very clear to young boys of this generation. Mind you, he's writing this in 1925, but the time that he is talking about is around sort of 1917, 1918. That is the time he's talking about. Because, of course, much of what the novel says is taken from the details of the Rowlatt Committee report. We all remember that the Rowlatt Committee report was responsible for a mass uprising, and of course, most memorably at Jallianwala Bagh, which resulted in the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. So that was the result of the Rowlatt Committee report. And much of the details of this novel is actually taken from the Rowlatt Committee report. So, therefore, we can very easily conjecture that this was sometime around, yeah, 1916, 17, 18, around that time. But of course, the novel is coming much later. And Shibram Chakraborty says in the introduction that thank God, he says, thank God that now in India, those men are no longer there. By those men, he basically means that India has now been rid of terrorism. Now, why would he be ostensibly, supporting the British government, which is what he appears to be doing. He appears to be ostensibly supporting the British government. Why would he do that? Well, that is because before writing this novel, he himself was in jail. He himself was in jail. And he was in jail because he had gotten involved in the freedom struggle. And because he had become involved in freedom struggle and because he was sent to jail, and of course he was subsequently released, I think at some point he decided, no, that's quite enough of freedom struggle for one life. Thank you very much. I am not going to go that way anymore. And he basically turned to fiction to give you this diatribe, as it were, against armed revolution and in favor of rural renewal and rural regeneration. So this novel then is such an extraordinary work because of the very simple reason that it forces us to ask a question that I don't think is ever asked. Namely, was the Indian freedom struggle 100% heteronormative? Are
Mhm.
we basically saying that everybody who took part in the Indian freedom struggle was 100% heterosexual? Are we saying that in the freedom struggle, in those very many organizations that mushroomed at this time to oppose the British, and mind you, the overwhelmingly large number of these organizations were all male organizations. So if they were all male organizations, it meant that men would be spending a lot of time, days, months, years in very close proximity to each other. Was there no romance? Did the men never fall in love with each other? If they did, first of all, is that emotionally possible? I don't think so. If they did, where are those accounts? I cannot possibly talk about Shibram Chakraborty without also mentioning um, a Hindi writer. And this Hindi writer is producing, again, from Calcutta, but he is producing them in Hindi. He is producing short stories at exactly the time. So, therefore, in 1924, a Hindi writer called Pandey Bechan Sharma, who writes under the pen name of Ugra, he is producing these extraordinary short stories in the Hindi magazine called Matwala. And he is writing these short stories, which are subsequently translated by Ruth Vanita and are published as Chocolate and Other Stories of Male Desire. He's writing these short stories in which teachers are falling in love with their students, male teachers falling in love with male students. These are being written in 1924, 1925, 1926. There's a huge outcry regarding the short stories of Pandey Bechan Sharma, so much so that the outcry actually reaches Gandhiji, who is sent these short stories. Gandhiji, God bless him, reads these short stories because you see, these short stories, they do a very interesting thing. And that is the same thing that Shibram Chakraborty does as well, which is that the short stories are going to show, this teacher. Oh, by the way, many of these short stories are set in Lucknow. They're not set in Calcutta. They're all set in Lucknow, but they're published in Calcutta and they're written in Hindi and they're published in a Hindi magazine. So in these short stories, you find, some teacher falling in love with a student, some older guy falling in love with a younger guy, and you are given a description of how the romance continues. It's not so much of a romance, it's more like seduction. But ultimately, at the end of the story, Pandey Bechan Sharma is going to say, oh, that this is a terrible, terrible, virus that is now rampant across India. This virus is going to destroy the youth of India and all of that. And apparently, there were all these nicknames, there were these colloquialisms for these pretty boys whom the men would be attracted to. So therefore, these boys would be called pocketbook. They would be called chocolate, as in chocolate, and various other terms would be used for these, Haseen comes in ladke.
Mhm.
That is the kind of phrase that they would use. Same strategy that Shibram Chakraborty is following, which is to say that I'm going to show homosexuality, but I'm also going to condemn it. I'm going to show love between two boys, and that I'm not going to condemn. Uh, Pandey Bichan Sharma is doing something very, very similar at exactly the same time. He is showing you the seduction of men by young boys, and right at the end, he's saying, "Oh, this is all very bad, very bad." So when Gandhiji read these short stories, he read the short stories and says, I don't understand what the problem is over here. This man is clearly condemning this kind of behavior. I am not going to say anything more about this. So Pandey Vachan Sharma basically got away with writing these short stories because he was doing something which in the 30s they started to do in America. Now, what they were doing in America is called they activated something called the Hayes Code, Hays code, the Hayes Code. Now, the Hayes Code was basically, this list of rules that were made absolutely compulsory for the film industry to follow. Because what is going on then is that through the 1920s, people in America are noticing a very, very high exposure given to licentiousness. Yeah, all kinds of orgies, all kinds of, sexually promiscuous behavior is being shown on the screen. And that is something that a lot of people are very, very disturbed by. Mind you, that is happening in the 1920s. The same time that this is happening in the US, you've got the flapper society, promiscuity. Yes. At the same time, in India, you have got Shibram Chakraborty, who's writing Chele Boyoshe, and you've got Pandey Bechan Sharma, who's writing his, homosexually tinted short stories. Now, what the Hays Code does is that it gives you these rules that all films will have to abide by, namely that the hero and the heroine should not be seen anywhere near a bed. Anywhere near a bed. The hero and the heroine should not even be shown sitting on a bed. Even that would be too much for the American public to handle. Now, there was this American film director called Cecil B. DeMille, and he sort of said, well, this is just complete nonsense. And he said that I'm not going to be interested in what this nonsense thing that's going on. So what he did was he started to practice something which subsequently became known as 6 reels of sin and one of redemption. So what he did was 6 reels of the movie would be all about orgies and semi-nudity and kissing and cuddling and all of that. And then the final reel is where all these people have been doing orgies and kissing and cuddling and making out. They would all be killed. And so, therefore, the Cecil B. DeMille, when he was asked, well, why are you showing all this sort of nonsense? I thought that this is something that you should not show. And Cecil B. DeMille says, yeah, well, exactly. These are all terrible behavior. This is terrible behavior. I have to show the public that this is terrible behavior. If you do this, then this is what happens to you. See? So, because I am not promoting this kind of behavior. I'm only warning the audience against it. So therefore, he got away. He got away with it. Ultimately, of Hays Code fell into disuse. What Hays Code is doing is something that Shibram Chakraborty does as well. He shows the homosexuality, and then at the same time, he says, "Oh, very bad, very bad." And that is also something that Pandey Bechan Sharma is doing. He's showing you homosexuality, and then he's saying, "Very bad, very bad." And I think that this is a very interesting moral tightrope that these literateurs were walking, and they seem to have got away with it. What is extraordinary is that Pandey and Sharma's short stories had pretty much disappeared from the public scene until Ruth Vanita revived them. Ruth Vanita, incidentally, has also translated Pandey and Sharma's autobiography. And you also have, Shibram Chakraborty's novel, which, if the stars align properly, all of India will get to read in English translation next year. So therefore, that is a very brief summary of this very complex novel that I'm hoping that everybody will get to see in English translation very soon. Thank you so much for your patience, and I'm looking forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Niladri. Thank you very much. It was pretty, expansive kind of, you know, presentation that you made. You said that it's a novella, but yes, very, very engaging and
Yeah,
interesting one for that matter. And you have been able to at least bring alive three climbs. You've got, three different, say, uh, types of responses to, homoerotic motifs, and the
yeah.
trail and the perception society. We have got Pandey Bechan, and then we have got, of course, the Shibram Chakraborty, and what all was happening in the United States at that point in time. But more interestingly, early on, I really found it interesting. Is like, I mean, this is a very tenuous and a very delicately portrayed kind of relationship between Mohan and who's
Ashanto.
yeah, Ashanto, and it's problematized remarkably. And you see, we have got these two characters that you talked about. One is Devan, and another is Tarish, for that matter.
Mm,
And the entire, first of all, it's, I mean, see the kind of courage at that point in time that you're portraying something which possibly would
yeah.
be would be taboo at that point in time, and then approaching it from diverse perspectives. And
Mm,
the characterization is really, I mean, it's complex, I'd say,
yeah.
because, and then the variety of binarism that you pointed out in your
Yeah.
discussions: good, bad, not so good, not so bad, and then our clear-cut preferences for one thing and then for the other. And then Tarish is, contestation of something which is good for Devan, and something that you would term as good, and of course, Peck is that uh,
Mm,
is something like, indoctrinating goodness. And that logical kind of argument, I found that very, very challenging and engaging also. And not only that, another thing, I mean, you built a, an interesting theoretical framework as well. Uh, and this question as to how do we regard relationships and friendship, and this something, and this debate has been there, it's still there, it's still
mm,
out
yeah.
when it comes to when it comes to the society that we live in today.
Yeah.
These questions are around, and these problems still exist there. So a very, very, very nuanced kind of understanding of this text, and uh, this novel Chele Boyoshe, which concerns, the boyhood years, and uh, Shibram Chakraborty's uh, kind of, I would call it creative consciousness at that point in time, and
Mm,
his courage is
yeah.
something which really, which requires appreciation. And you brought in Ugra as well. When it comes to Ugra, and particularly, I mean, this is something really interesting, that you've got two kind of literary traditions, dealing with the same sort of homoerotic kind of, motifs and thematics
Yeah.
at that point, and that's really interesting. And I'm quite sure that our attendees today are going to have their observations and their questions also. And I just had a very simple query, Professor Chatterjee. Could you briefly tell us something about what all did he kind of, anything else that he wrote about? And is it the predominant kind of theme that he deals with? Or, I mean, he deals with certain other sort of motifs as well, concerning possibly, say, society, politics, and the rest of that.
Mm. Thank you so much for those comments. Um, no, that's the interesting thing, is that once he has got this novel out of the way, he never approaches this subject ever again. He never ever approaches the subject ever again. His most famous novel happens to be the one in which he also very autobiographical, in which he shows that he has run away from a small town and he has gone to Kolkata exactly like he had done in his real life. That is called Bari Theke Paliye, which I guess translates as, running away from home. And that novel is regarded as one of the most important and one of the best known works of him because, of course, it was subsequently made into a film by a very highly regarded, intellectual film director of Bengal, namely Ritwik Ghatak. Now, Ritwik Ghatak is regarded as being one of the, lions, as it were, one of the gods of Bengali intellectual cinema, along with Satyajit Ray and Mrinal Sen. So therefore, his reputation in the intellectual circles is built on Bari Theke Paliye and on many. He wrote some poems as well. He seems to be very, very interested in kisses. He wrote a very long poem called Chumbon, as in Chumban, and then one can understand that he loves the idea of the kiss. And there are so many kisses that happen in the novel. You know, there are stolen kisses, there are consensual kisses. So therefore, he writes these kind of works. He writes short stories, and of course, the larger corpus of his work are these kind of funny novels and funny short stories featuring these two characters called Harshvardhan and Govardhan. And they bundle, they sort of, they bungle their way through life. They have these funny misadventures. Everybody laughs. Homosexuality, one novel. And what is weird is that subsequently, when he is asked in a television interview that does your writing career start with Bari Theke Paliye, he says yes. So later on in his career, he actually
disowned his own work. Yeah.
Yes, he doesn't mention it. He doesn't
Yes.
mention it. So therefore, and one can imagine why, because he probably regarded as a folly of his youth. It was a mistake. I'm so sorry I wrote that novel. I wish I hadn't written that novel. Oh, it was just a youthful misadventure, and I hope people would forget all about it. Well, unfortunately, it is still in print.
Okay.
He was just 22. He was just 22 when he wrote it.
Yes. It's not, which is why even when you read my translation, you will see that it is not of a very high literary merit. This is somebody who's just 22. I think that he really wanted to get it out. He wanted to get it out. He couldn't write a straightforward love story of two boys. He decided that he would couch it in this sort of cautionary tale about joining the Indian freedom struggle. Please don't take up armed resistance. Don't fight the government. The government is doing a very nice job. Why don't you go and work in the villages? There's a good boy. So that is the narrative that he was couching this love story in.
And just see its contemporary relevance.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
We are hatred.
Oh, absolutely. No, why are you opposing the government? तो अच्छा ही तो काम कर रहा है. So Shibram Chakraborty, but I think Shibram Chakraborty, he was really terrified that if he were sent to jail again, God knows what would happen to him. So since he had already, वो एक बार जेल की हवा खा चुके थे, so he knew what it was like to be in jail. He did not want to risk it anymore. Incidentally, Pandey Bechan Sharma was also sent to jail. But Pandey Bechan Sharma was sent to jail not because of his homosexual writings, much like Shibram Chakraborty. Pandey Bechan Sharma was sent because this particular Kolkata magazine, these Kolkatans are unbelievable. They always stir up trouble. Terrible people of Kolkata. So therefore, so Matwala had published some fairly incendiary articles against the British government, and they were actually authored by Pandey Bechan Sharma. So therefore, Pandey Bechan Sharma had fallen on the wrong side of the law. Shibram Chakraborty had fallen on the wrong side of the law. But both of them were also dabbling in sort of homosexual literature.
Yeah, ma'am, we can now open it. I think if we have some observations from the participants and
Yes, anybody who has questions or observations, you can come onto the screen or put your thoughts in the chat box. Niladri, I'm told he wrote about 150 books. Huh?
Yes,
And
yeah, yeah. But
yeah, that's so prolific. And yet he ran into financial trouble towards the end. And he
yeah.
didn't get the. So is it true that he didn't get any fame or recognition while he was alive and died in penury?
No, no, no. He see, that's the weird thing about Shibram Chakraborty is that he was fantastically famous, but he was chronically cheated by his publishers.
Mhm.
But
He was
there's also a
chronically,
reference, there's
yeah,
a reference that he belonged to a royal family.
he
So
did.
that does that come into his work?
No, no, it absolutely not. But mind you, he's not related to the. So he is actually related to the royal family of Chachol. Chachol is this tiny village. I was there several years ago. Chachol is this tiny village in Malda. So he belongs to the royal family of Chachol, but he doesn't have royal blood in him in that sense. His
Mhm,
family was rather adopted by the then royal family
mhm,
because they were unable to have an offspring. So therefore, there is no direct line of descent,
mhm,
but yes, he definitely did legally belong to the royal family of Chachol. But then,
mhm,
he was somebody who was never interested in advertising the fact that he belonged to the royal family. When he
mhm,
came to Calcutta, he would very often sleep on the streets.
mhm,
And as far as why he died in penury, well, that is because, firstly, because, why did he write so many books? Well, he wrote so many books because, if he didn't write those books, he would just starve to death.
Mhm.
mhm,
Because every time he would submit a manuscript, he'd get paid some amount of money, and he never believed in savings. He never saved. The moment he got something, he would immediately buy people gifts. He was a spendthrift. He was generous to a fault. He would constantly say, "Oh, I've got some money. Let me buy you a shirt. Let me buy you this or that." So, therefore, he would constantly be spending money on other people with the result that he had very little or no money himself.
Mhm.
So that is why he died in such dire straits.
Mhm.
we would not have known about this novel at all unless, it was just sheer coincidence, sheer chance that you brought it up at the Dibrugarh conference. And
Yes.
this is actually the third discussion that we've had on a novel that's completed a centenary. 2 weeks ago,
Yes.
we were talking about Mr. Dalloway, and before
Oh,
that,
Yes.
we discussed Great Gatsby. And 3 years ago, we also had a proper conference on T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. But
Ah,
we really
yes.
are very grateful that you brought this novel to our notice. And I'm sure when your book comes out, well, there'll be more buzz around it. But let's see what other people have to say. Professor Prasad, would you like to say anything? And Sunena, you're getting ready with something. Yes, Professor
Good,
Prasad first.
good evening. I think it's nice to see you, Professor Chatterjee, again. We met in Jamalpur.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think this novel is autobiographical, and two novels of Bengali literature, two writers come to my mind when I yesterday got this mail and started reading about it. Uh, one is Abol Tobol
Ah,
uh,
yes.
by
Hmm.
Sukumar Ray, and the other is Bankim Chandra's Pathir Panchali.
That's
No, that's Vibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay.
Vibhuti Bhushan
Uh,
Rao, sorry, yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I think they all are about growing up and in different contexts.
Well, Abul Tabul is not a novel. Abul Tabul is just a collection
It's a
of
kind of nonsense.
nonsense verse. Yes, so they were very much in the tradition of Edward Lear.
Yeah.
So very much in the tradition of Edward Lear. Also, I I don't see. That's the funny thing is that there is nothing he does write autobiographies. So he produces 2 volumes of autobiographies, Shibram Chakraborty does. But in neither of these autobiographies does he spend any time on Chele Boyoshe. There's
Mhm.
almost total silence. So therefore, we actually don't know whether any part of the novel was autobiographical. And of course, the plot is it is so ludicrous that I'm pretty certain that very little of it is autobiographical. The only bit that is autobiographical is that you have a boy from Malda who comes to Calcutta. That is the only thing that is autobiographical. All the other things, I think, they are just a figment of his imagination. He just wants to write a love story about 2 boys falling in love, and he just sort of made it as he went along. But yeah, also Bibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay, I'm not terribly sure how autobiographical that was, because it's very strange, because Bibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay was very much an urban writer, a very, very urban writer. And of course, Pather Panchali, that is set very much in rural Bengal. So it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary how he manages that. So I think that there is probably a grain of autobiography, not too much.
Another thing is that I think this homosexuality was there very much. The chocolate was very important
Yeah,
story of that
yeah,
time.
yeah.
But there is one thing when you discussed in a theoretical framework came to my mind was Rahi Masum Raza's Dil Ek
Ah,
Sada Kagaz.
yes,
Dil Ek
yes,
Sada Kagaz. Because that is also a kind of coming of age novel and
yes.
growing up, and that is full of uh, homosexual overtones. And
Yeah.
I think that apart from homosexuality that is there in Chele Boyoshe, there is something that is educative, that is about discipline, about the training ground for uh, adults, adulthood. We can see it from that perspective also, Chele Boyoshe.
Well, not too much of it. And I think so. The only kind of, if you regard this novel as being didactic at all, then the only didactic part of the novel is, you know, give up armed struggle, be a good boy, go and work in the villages. So therefore, that is the only bit of message that he seems to have. Be like Shotish, do something for rural Bengal. Don't be like Deben. Don't be like all these other figures that are there who are picking up guns and shooting down the British. So therefore, that is the part, and it's very interesting the way in which he does it. He actually, it's very strange because Deben falls in love with one of the revolutionaries. And this particular man says, no, I'm so sorry, I'm not interested in you. We subsequently come to know that he's not interested in Deben because he has given his heart to another man. And so therefore, all that he seems to say is that, look, we are here to save the motherland. We are here to fight and to die. This talk of romance and love, it doesn't suit us. We, of course, know that here is somebody who is already in love with another man who, of course, dies, whose name is Dudoy. So therefore, but Shibram Chakraborty is totally negating this whole culture. And he says, violence cannot be the way. Stay away from violence, abjure violence, get back to peaceful work.
Yeah. Sunaina,
Of
do you have to?
echoes are there in Kodi Diye Kinlam, Bimal
Oh,
Mitra.
yes. Yeah.
Some young boys are involved in this kind of activities.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's what I
Yeah.
wanted to say.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. It's also there. Remember, in one of Tagore's novels, so therefore, there's something that Satyajit Ray subsequently makes a movie out of called Charulata, which Satyajit Ray regarded as his best film. In that particular novel, you have exactly these two kind of binaries that are there. So therefore, the heroine of the novel, her husband is somebody who's completely opposed to revolution and terrorism. And yet, this lady, she is massively attracted to somebody called Shondeep, who is very much engaged in the freedom struggle. And ultimately, of course, Shondeep loses out and the lady returns to her husband. So therefore, Rabindranath Tagore himself, to a very large extent, was not terribly in favor of violent freedom struggle. We get that sense even from Tagore. So you have a lot of literature that is coming out at that time, which seems to be taking a very safe ground, as if to say, no, no, why go for this? Do other stuff. Why shoot down the British?
Why question the government of the day? Yeah. Yeah. So next.
Manena?
Uh, Good evening, sir. No question as such, but it was a pleasure to listen to this very engaging talk.
Thank
Something
you.
that came to my mind, when you started the talk, it was you mentioned 7 steps around the fire, and it immediately struck a chord with me. And this is, I think, one of the very famous radio plays by Mahesh Dattani, and yeah,
Yes,
where this is also about transphobia and how murder mysteries surrounding the
absolutely.
murder of a eunuch. So that came to my mind, and it's understandable that the book that was under discussion was written long time ago, and how the writer must not have broached the topic of homoeroticism or homosexuality ever after. Yes,
Mm.
weighed down by societal pressures or the dictates of the society.
Yeah,
Uh, Yes, that must have been one of the major reasons we can assess. But overall, it was a delight to listen to this engaging session, and thanks for bringing to light this novel. We wouldn't have come to know about it otherwise. Thank you.
hopefully you will see the English translation next year. So
Yes, yes, yes.
They say
Thank
he did
thank you so
not
much.
preserve his manuscripts. Huh?
No, no, no. The man. See, that's the weird thing is that we just don't know where they are, which is why I ran into I basically came up against a void because of course you see because he never married.
Mhm.
There is no such thing as a Shibram Chakraborty estate. So when I
Mhm.
wanted to look for somebody who would give me the
Mhm.
translation copyright, there was nobody. There is of course the publisher who publishes Shibram Chakraborty, but then there are other publishers who publish Shibram Chakraborty as well. And when I approached this particular publisher, they said, oh, we have translation copyright and we are not going to give you. A translation can never have a publisher can never have a translation copyright.
Mhm.
That
Copyright. Yeah.
can only belong to the author or to the author's estate. When I was doing my previous book on Krishna Gopal Mollik, well, I approached his son, and his son signed off on the translation copyright. But in this case, and also
Certainly.
I very quickly want to mention that Arunava Sinha, who has created quite a career for himself by
Mhm.
translating from Bengali literature. Arunava Sinha has also translated Shivram Chakraborty, not this one, but he has translated the Harshavardhan Govardhan tales, the funny
Mhm.
tales of Shivram Chakraborty. So I talked to Arunava Sinha and I said, what did you do about the translation copyright? He said, when my book came out, it was very clearly stated that nobody could be found who would have the translation right. So we
Okay.
don't know. Yeah. We don't know.
Uh, what about his autobiography, God, Earth, and Love?
Yes. So that is the interesting thing. Yeah, but here and then of course he produces another autobiography called I
Mhm.
think Love, Earth, and God. So
God,
therefore
Earth,
there
and
are two
Love.
volumes. And yeah, so there are so one is and then but again, in this autobiography, he basically talks about all the other aspects of his life. He talks about his work,
Mhm.
freedom struggle, this, that, and the other. But he has always been remarkably reticent, as it were, to talk about his emotional life. He has never been very I mean, he was never very forthcoming.
Mhm.
He probably was very uncomfortable. And like I said, Chele Boyoshe barely gets a mention, barely gets a mention. So therefore, this is a novel that he wrote, he didn't want to talk about it, he didn't want to think about it. He probably wanted everybody to forget about it. But hey, literature doesn't work that way.
And there's this Cholo Potol Tuli.
Yeah. So So Shibram Chakraborty is very well known for his puns. And the puns are untranslatable. But just because you mentioned Cholo Potol Tuli, I think I'll have to tell you exactly how that pun works.
Yes.
So potol, as it, the pointed gourd, the vegetable, right? So therefore, Cholo Potol Tuli, it's a very funny line because Potol Tola, it basically is a colloquialism which means to die. So when you say so and so potol tuleche, you mean that so and so has died. Now, what does the bitter gourd got to do with death? Well, this is the thing: is that in olden days, beautiful eyes were called potol chera. So it is almost as though your eyes are shaped like the bitter gourd. And potol tola is when your eyeballs went up, which is when you died. So therefore, potol meant when you basically your eyes go up and you die. Potol tola. So when you say cholo potol tuli, it has this very funny play with the idea of potol tola. It could either mean let's all die,
Yeah, let's.
or it could mean let's all go harvesting for the pointed gourd.
Okay.
So it's a play on this colloquialism, and that is typical Shibram Chakraborty. That is the kind of word play that he is very, very famous for. And I would never attempt to translate any of his work that deal with wordplay because they're impossible. Because you would need half a page of footnotes to
Yeah.
explain
Yeah, yeah.
how the pun is working. But
Absolutely.
thank you so much for bringing up that very funny
There are
title,
two, there
Cholopotol
are
Tuli.
two movies connected with him, Runaway and this one.
So therefore, Runaway is
Uh-huh.
the one that I mentioned right now, which is Bari Theke Paliye, which is running away from home. By
Mhm.
the way, if you're interested, this whole movie is available on YouTube, so you can actually watch it.
Okay.
It's a magical, and that is also yeah. So that is also something is available on YouTube as well as his Doordarshan interview. That is also available on YouTube. So if you want to see what Shibram Chakraborty looked like and sounded like, YouTube will show you.
Okay, great. You know what I
Oh, he's a
really
fascinating character.
what I really like is the passion that you put into your work, and it's very obvious that you have enjoyed reading Shibram Chakrabarty, and you're so involved with it, right?
Because I thought that this is a story that needed to be told. It's just that when we think about history, we think
Mhm.
about history as 100% heteronormative heterosexual enterprise,
Mhm.
and history is seldom like that. Even what is yesterday? Yesterday in class, when I was talking about the history of homosexuality, and when I mentioned the fact that Babar fell in love with a boy in the bazaar, my students, there was this collective gasp that rippled through the class, and I said, yeah, yeah, Babar fell in love with a boy. And what is even more remarkable is when Babar is writing, I mean, when he's dictating his autobiography at the grand old age of 45, who is taking the dictation? One of his daughters. So here you have the father dictating to his daughter, and he's saying, oh, yes, I remember a time when I was a teenager. Incidentally, the age at which Babar fell in love is the same age that Mohan and Oshanto fall in love.
Mm.
So Babar fell in love with a boy as a teenager. These two figures, they're also falling in love with each other as teenagers. What happened to that history? Why are we not told about it? So therefore, I thought that this novel needed to be out in the public domain because it probably will help to complicate our understanding of exactly what was the gendered sexual nature of the freedom struggle.
There's one last question. Did Chakraborty have any exposure to Western education, Western literature?
Yes,
Because
yes, he did. I
I can
mean,
see the
yeah, he did.
connections. I can see
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
connections,
Yeah, he
Auden,
did.
W.H. Auden, Isherwood, and then you have Shakespeare and the Lord that he wrote for, Southampton.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can see all those connections, and only if when you're
He did.
familiar with something like that do you have the courage even to express a story like this. Huh?
You're absolutely. He did. He did. He absolutely did. We do know that you see that's the funny thing is that his formal education ended very soon. He never completed his formal education because he ran away from home.
Mm,
But he was a voracious reader. He was a voracious reader,
mm,
and you are going to find in the novel, references to Nordic legends,
mhm,
and you think, oh, how did he know about the Nordic legends and
mm,
all of that? Well, he
mm,
did because he read up on it.
mm,
So his Shibram Chakraborty's brain was a sponge. It
mm,
imbibed a lot. And incidentally, you find the same thing in the short stories of Pandey and Sharma. I'll constantly be drawing parallels between the two because they were living at the same time, about the same age. In the Pandey and Sharma short story, Chocolate, he refers to Shakespeare. He refers to Oscar Wilde.
mm, mm,
So
mm.
he clearly knew that there is a kind of a homosexual literature that is there in the West, and he is ostensibly he's referring to it. Because there is this conversation that happens in one of Pandey Bechan Sharma's short stories. One man tells the other, oh,
Mm.
don't try talking to him about homosexuality. Don't try telling him that it's a bad thing. Because the moment you start telling him it's a bad thing, he's going to say, oh, then what about Shakespeare? What about Oscar Wilde?
Yeah,
mm,
So Pandey Bechan Sharma, he was using Western literature, but then that's what he was doing. On the one hand, he was having his characters refer to Shakespeare and Oscar Wilde, but at the same time, he himself was condemning these characters. He was saying, oh, very bad man. So that's what I meant. He's walking this very interesting tightrope.
mm,
yeah, I think, and secondly, one thing which is really interesting that ma'am pointed out is that ideas do, have been flowing,
Travel.
but but really, I find it really interesting in the sense that this happens with writers. They tend not to
Yeah.
acknowledge, but they
Yeah.
are influenced and influenced powerfully, and they have that uncanny knack of invisibilizing everything, that has
Yeah.
actually shaped them deep down. So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
exposure to Western literature, Western tradition must have kind of, not just empowered
Oh,
them,
I'm sure. I'm sure.
emboldened them. That,
I'm
okay,
sure.
fine, here's a reality which is prevalent here. And
Yeah. I'm
maybe,
sure.
yeah. So I think this makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So he does a lot of this reading. He's very knowledgeable, and because I think it also came from the fact that he probably was very conscious of the fact that he's never had a formal education, I mean, a
Yeah.
complete formal education in that sense. And I think that was kind of he felt some kind of a lack, and he was probably trying to make up for that by reading absolutely everything that came to his hand, and which is why you have this sort of extraordinary work. Yes.
It's been a riveting session, really. Can I
Thank you
ask
so much.
everybody who's logged in, if you switch on your videos, we'll be able to see everybody's faces on the screen. So everyone who's logged in, please switch on your video so that we can see all the faces. Yeah. So here's everyone coming in. Yeah, great.
Hi, Niladri.
Mhm.
Manpreet here.
Yes, hey, very nice to
And
see you.
I
Uh,
just exactly what Professor Jaitka used the word. I was going to say riveting talk. And thanks for introducing us to, Chakraborty, another writer we didn't know of.
I
And
know,
yeah,
yeah.
so very nice, very nice.
So it was a
Yeah,
very brave thing.
now the PhD students have something to think about.
Yeah. And of course, we'll wait for your book to come out.
Eagerly.
Okay.
Certainly.
So
Yeah.
these are
Well, they are saying that they're editing it, but they haven't shown me anything as yet, so I don't know.
okay. Wonderful. Right. So if there are no more observations, comments, questions, we have taken longer than we thought, but well, that's
I'm
how
so
it is.
sorry.
When we
I'm so
start
sorry.
talking to Niladri, we never want to say bye. Yes, Roshan?
Well,
So with that, I thank you. I thank you all. And in particular, thank you very much, Professor Niladri Chatterjee. It was such a delight, very informative, and
thank you.
lots and lots of ideas. And you see, quite a few pointers, for our
Hmm.
researchers and for our colleagues, to work on and to explore, of course. Thank you. Thanks for this very lively talk, that you delivered. And thank you, Ma'am Jaitka. Thank you very much. You keep working
Thank you so
wonderfully with
much.
us. And all our participants, I can see Professor Manpreet there and all our friends, I think around 26 at the moment. Thank you all. Thank you very much for being
Count
there.
was
And
the count was close to 40 in between.
it was,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
And
what's
It
this is
gradually
being
came down.
recorded. This is being recorded. It will be uploaded on YouTube and the link will be sent to everyone. Please share it. Share
I
it so that
will. I will.
people know of the interesting discussions that we have. And there'll be
Absolutely.
many more. Yeah, there'll be many more
Yeah.
around the corner.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you all. Thank
Thank
you
you so
very much.
much. Bye bye.
Meet again in 2 weeks' time.
We will. Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly.